All right, Gator fans, it is time for the weekly preview show. I am joined by Will Thomas of Tailgate Talk SEC, but also more recently, a peek inside the SEC. Will, how you doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm. It's been a day. It's been a day, but I'm here and I'm ready to talk about this game. Florida Miami Saturday, September 20th, 7:30 p.m. And listen, we're gonna have to call it like it is. Florida has not looked good the last couple of weeks, and Miami has been really impressive. They have wins against Notre Dame and USF, both teams ranked at the time that they beat them. Has anything about Miami surprised you?
I mean, really just how quickly their whole offense has clicked, right? Because it's a lot of new. Obviously, Carson Beck there is new.
Yeah.
Their three leading receivers, CJ Daniels and Keelan Marion, are transfers, and Malachi Tony's a true freshman. And it's really not normal for offenses to click that fast when they're all transfers like that. But it's been really effective and really efficient. They put up 27 on Notre Dame and then 45 and 49 on Bethune-Cookman and USF respectively. They're a really dangerous unit, really dangerous, and they've been playing really well. And they've been all those dynamic playmakers. Sometimes it takes a minute to adjust, but it really hasn't for them.
They have been led by somebody that Florida is familiar with. Carson Beck we're used to seeing him in red and black, but he is now on Miami's roster. How much, or I guess maybe has he exceeded your expectations through his first three games as a Cane?
I mean, just really with how effective he's been. I was worried what his arm might look like after his injury last season, but he's been pretty healthy. He's looked like he's got some good zip on the ball, and he got comfortable really fast, really quickly in that offense.
All right. Well, he was careless last year against Florida with the football in Jacksonville, and UF's defense really kind of had his number. I will swear up and down for the rest of my life that Florida would have beaten Georgia had DJ Lagway finished that game. Do you think that it's possible that he may be careless against UF's defense again, or if maybe he has cleaned that up a little bit? Will had to jump out there. He'll come back in when he's got when he can, but we will just kind of go on from here until he comes back in. I'm going to skip ahead and talk to you a little bit about what Florida's got to do to win, what Miami's got to do to win, and some of the things I'm looking at. And when Will gets back with us, we will continue on with the questions. But, like I said, Saturday, September 20th, 7:30 at night, this is game day. This is all eyes, everybody around the country, eyes on the Gators. And there's a lot of pressure with that. Right now, the line is Miami by 7.5. I think that might be kind of generous, but we shall see. Florida's got a tall task ahead of them if they are going to win this game. And there's a couple things that they really have to do. I need to see Florida's offensive line play like the offensive line that we were expecting over the summer. It wasn't just the Gator media that were hyping this offensive line as one of the top in the country. It really was mainstream media everywhere. They have returned a lot of talent. They played really well the second half of the year, and Florida fans expected more than we have seen so far. So I need Florida's offensive line to play like we expected them to, do the things that we know that they're capable of, give Lagway time, and allow our running game to kind of get established more than they have through the first three games. And conversely, we need Florida's defensive line to do a better job than they have done. They don't do a good job bringing pressure, getting to the quarterback. That's something I need to see improve. This is a tough job because Miami has one of the very best defensive front seven in the entire country. I think they're better than LSU's that we saw last weekend. And they also have been really, really tough at the offensive line. They've been able to establish the run. They've got a great running back room, and Florida has got to win the line of scrimmage. This is a tall task. They also have to make sure they establish the run with Jaden Baugh. I don't love the way Florida got away from him against LSU. I think that he is one of the top running backs in the country. I think it takes pressure off of Lagway if Florida is able to establish the run. So that is something I am absolutely looking for. And defensively, Florida has to continue playing as they have played the last couple of games. I'd love to see them get to the quarterback, but their defense, 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games, is pretty damn impressive. Something that's got to be more impressive, though, is DJ Lagway. He has to play better. I think we saw, the worst performance we've seen out of him in orange and blue last week. I doubt we see as poor a performance. He's just too big of a competitor, too much of an athlete to have 2 outings like that. But he's got to play better. He's got to make the correct reads. He's got to see downfield better than he did on Saturday night. I do think Florida's wide receivers are better than Miami's secondary. So if they can win that matchup, that is going to go a long way in keeping this game close, giving Florida a chance to win. But again, that circles back to, can Florida's offensive line block Miami's defensive line? The only way the wide receivers can win is if that line of scrimmage holds up against what is an incredibly good pass rush. And then can we please see a good outing from special teams? Trey Smack has gotten better since the USF game. Burnell Brown III, he is a game breaker. Use him. I would love to see a punt or a kickoff returned for a touchdown. That could help keep this game close. Florida has to play mistake-free football. They've got to establish the line of scrimmage. They have got to get their wide receivers out there in space and establish a running game. And then Florida's got to have good effort. They have always brought good effort under Coach Napier, but Miami's good. There's lots of headlines about struggles internally. And if Florida struggles early, I'm concerned about what the effort will look like the rest of the game. They cannot hang their heads or this could get absolutely ugly. All right, guys, before I go on, let's get some of your comments. What do you want to see? I'm going to go through some of these before we go on to what Miami must do to win this one. Really want to see us beat Miami, but I won't hold my breath. Will Napier change his ways and play 2 quarterbacks if needed? I doubt it. Hire Lane Kiffin. He will make Lagway play way better. I think Lane Kiffin is an offensive genius. We're just not there yet. So that's a conversation for another day. Put Tramel Jones in. He will definitely change. Miami won't like that. I think Napier has made it incredibly clear he's going with Lagway. He trusts Lagway. We just got to hope that they were able to make some changes this week and he's going to have a better outing. Give Jaden Baugh 20 to 25 touches, not 12 or less like last time. I am here for that. I think Trey Smack just had the yips with USF, and those were some long kicks too. Honestly, I think it was the holder. I think they've gotten that corrected, and I'm hopeful we don't have those issues anymore. Hey, Will. All right, we got you back. Well, we can't hear you, but as soon as
that's because I was on mute. Sorry about that. How's it going?
Well, now we can hear you, and we're good. No worries. Okay, let's hop back into this. I just talked about what I want to see from Florida for them to win, but we'll circle back to the rest of that. Let me get to the questions we were going to ask you. Okay, so what I was starting to ask you right before the camera went off was that Carson Beck was pretty careless with the ball against UF defense last year. Is that something that you expect could be a possibility this year, or do you think that's something he's cleaned up at Miami?
I think he's definitely cleaned it up a little bit, right? Because I think at the end of that Georgia tenure, it felt like it was sort of maybe a confidence issue for him, sort of what was happening, because a lot of it had to do with his receivers. We know how bad Georgia's receivers had to do with their drops last year. He is like a lot sharper and more confident, but I do think he does put the ball in dangerous spots at times still. We saw it against Notre Dame, where CJ Daniels had to bail him out with that Odell Beckham Jr. type of catch. And the Gator defense is a playoff caliber unit, and they've been playing exceptionally well. So there's really no reason to believe that they can't force a turnover or two. But my question is, with this flow of the game, could we see Miami take on the game plan that it seemed like LSU did last week, where they weren't really taking many risks because their defense versus Florida's offense was such a big advantage for them? So obviously, if that's the case, it'll be harder to force turnovers when the ball's not being put into any sort of risky spots. But I do think as long as Miami is in passing downs, whether that means they're behind the sticks or it's just a really close game, that Florida could totally make some moves and maybe force some turnovers.
You talked about them playing conservatively, which is what happened with LSU. Their offensive line and their rushing attack are good. How
Mhm.
do they stack up against a UF defense that is now going to be without not only LJ McCray, but once again without Caleb Banks?
I think they match up really, really well. I mean, so far this year from Miami, they have 5.1 yards per carry. They have a great line yards per rush stats and success rate on their running downs. Now, they're not an explosive ground attack at all, but they don't really need to be because it's just a chip away, sort of lean on the defense kind of attack. And per PFF, more in the pass rush sense, Florida's pass rush has the lowest pressure rate in Power Four. They only have 2 sacks over 3 games, which is 123rd in the country. Like the defensive line for Florida was really supposed to be a strength. It was because of how much talent was there. Obviously, not having Caleb Banks for most of the year to this point has hurt that. But with the other guys around, like Tyreek Sapp, like George Gums getting pressured, you would have expected the D line to be playing better than it is. And Miami in this spot, they are a very hard team to try and get that corrected on because of how good their offensive line is.
Defensively, Miami has also been solid this year. They held USF down and they basically blanked Notre Dame until that fourth quarter. How much does their defensive line concern you against UF's offensive line?
I mean, a lot. Florida's offensive line really has not been the strength that we all thought it would be with guys like Jake Slaughter and Austin Barber. Now, in that LSU game, like we saw Barber, he had some awesome reps, and so was Slaughter. But as a whole unit, it's been a little weaker than we thought it was going to be. And Miami's defensive line, very arguably the best defensive line in the country, with guys like Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor. And with Lagway kind of already seeming like he's pressing too hard, like he's being rushed, like he's making bad decisions, that doesn't seem like a really good matchup because Miami's front seven has a havoc rate of 13.1%, which just means what percentage of plays do they force a tackle for loss, pass deflection, turnover, things like that. And Florida's offense allows havoc to be like, it's going to sound weird, but like happen to them 10.7% of the time. And neither of those are good numbers for the Gators. So looking at it on paper, Miami definitely has the ability, I think, to disrupt Florida's offense up front. So it's really up to that O-line to really prove me wrong and play above where they've played so far to make sure that doesn't happen.
So we all know about Lagway's struggles last week, but if there is a position group that UF could possibly take advantage of, it's probably Miami's secondary. Do you have some thoughts there?
Definitely. I mean, Florida's wideouts, despite their lack of production and how bad the offense has looked, I still think that is one of the most talented receiver rooms in the country. And it's an absolute mismatch against Miami's defensive backs. They've graded poorly stopping explosive passing plays, and Florida grades very well when they do create those explosives in the air, even though we don't see that happen very often. Dallas Wilson is still out for this game. That news came out today, but there's still so many other weapons in that receiver room like Trey Wilson, Aiden Mizell, VB3, where I do think those receivers are going to be able to create some separation and really give DJ some places to throw the ball to be really effective.
So, a big key to taking advantage of that secondary is going to be blocking Ruben Bain, who has been on an absolute tear. Can UF stop that D line from a pass rush perspective?
If they're going to, it starts with giving the ball to Jaden Ball. You have to be able to establish him in the running game to really slow down that pass rush. And it seems like they haven't wanted to do it so far this year for whatever reason, because Ball has been really effective. And like in that game against LSU last week, they threw it 49 times, despite Ball averaging over 4.5 yards per carry over only the 10 rushes that he got. Like Jaden Ball has already shown both last year and so far this year that he can be an effective runner to slow down the pass rush. Florida just hasn't been doing it. And they have a bad explosive rush grade, on offense as Florida. Miami's is good on defense. But Florida's bad grade in that spot, I really do think is just because they haven't been trying to. Like the running game is good. They have great line yards per rush. They just haven't really committed to it. So I think there is a way to game plan around Miami's pass rush and not necessarily like neutralize it, but really dampen their effect. But it's unclear if that's what Florida's really going to go out there and do.
So there's a lot of areas that Florida fans are going to be concerned about. We've covered, several of them, but if you had to pick one that was your most concerned, matchup, what would you pick?
I think just the trench battles, honestly, because based on what we've seen, I really wouldn't be shocked if Miami is able to lean on both of Florida's lines. Because if Florida's offense has to play behind the sticks because of what Miami's defense is doing, whether it be due to play calling or the defensive execution, they're going to be in trouble. And if Florida's pass rush woes continue, and Miami's passing game is good enough where they can find a lot of success against that defense that has looked good, right? Like if Florida gets down by 10 or 14, that's a lot of points for that offense to try and make up in general. And also, we talked about earlier in the week, but like this Florida team, seems like morale is not very high. So if they go down 2 scores early, how much fight
Mhm.
back do we really see out of this team? So I am kind of worried about the trench battles on both sides for the Gators.
Okay, so let's ask the question in reverse. What do you think Miami fans that are watching this should maybe be the most concerned about from UF?
I think Lagray progressing back to the mean because 5 interceptions last week,
Mhm.
that's not who he is. We
Right.
know that that's not who he is as a quarterback. He showed that last year. He also had some awesome throws in that LSU game that just were mixed in with the 5 interceptions. And he also
Yeah,
had a perfect throw to Vanilla Brown against USF that would have helped him ice that game. Like he's still making good throws in big
sure.
moments. It's just that last week, the negative way outweighed the positive, so you don't really think about it. And you know who Florida's pass catchers are. They're really effective players, absolutely explosive in space. And I really do believe that for a passing offense with this much talent, it really just takes like one quarter where you're being efficient, where you're being explosive, where things are going well to really instill that confidence and rhythm to be a great offense. But the question is, do we get it? And
Yeah.
maybe we don't, right? Maybe Miami's pass rush is too good, but Florida, their passing offense literally has to be better than it was last week because I'm not sure it can be much worse. Um, so if they're able to progress back to the mean of really how good they actually are, that
Yeah.
could keep Florida in this game.
UF did play hard last week, especially defensively. Can they pull out another all-world effort? And if so, what is the realistic number that they can and need to hold Miami's balanced offense to?
I mean, I think they really do have to show up and play as hard as they can, or I'm not sure
Oh,
Napier
yeah.
makes it to Halloween. And that unit knows, like they'll never say it, but they know that they're what's good about that team right now. And I think they're going to go out there and play with some pride, especially against an in-state rival. Because when you have these games like Florida versus Miami, like all of these guys know each other. And they all want to
Mhm.
go out there and make a point and really compete.
Yeah.
And today,
And they
Jordan
all
Castell
know all
said,
the recruits are sitting in the stands
exactly.
watching.
Exactly. And Jordan Castell came out today and he said, they whooped us last year, talking about Miami. Of course, the defense wants to get back at them. Like, I think the attitude defensively, at least, is pretty good. Like, they know how good they are and they know what they can do to opposing offenses. And I think that they're a good enough unit to really hold anybody to a reasonable number as long as they want to. And to the second part of that
What is
question,
that number?
yeah, I think they got to hold Miami to maybe like 24 because Miami got to 27 on Notre Dame. That game was tight. I just
Mhm.
think that for this matchup, it has to be played in the 20s because even if Florida's offense does take a bit of a step, Miami's defense is still Miami's defense. So I don't think that they're going to get into the 30s or anything. So it has to be played in the 20s. I'd say 24 is probably that target number they have to hold Miami to.
Which Florida didn't get for context against USF or LSU. I have always maintained for the last 20 years, if a defense can hold a team to 21 points, the offense should be able to win. I'm not confident that that is going to happen, but that would be what I'm looking at. All right, it is now time for what has become my favorite part of these preview shows, and that is our more or less game. I want to thank Sleeper for their support. Use code PEAK, that's PEEK, for a 100% match up to $100. Terms and conditions apply, so see Sleeper's terms of use for more information. But all right, let's go ahead. I'm going to ask you these questions, and you are going to tell me more or less. Lagway has more or less than 226.5 yards rushing.
I think he goes over that mark, right? Because last week, in what we can all probably agree was his worst game as a passer, he threw for 287, right? And so even amongst all those picks and how bad the offense looked, he still almost hit 300 yards. So I think to a certain extent, the line being down at 226 is a bit of an overreaction to just the 5 interceptions and the 10 points scored, because I think Lagway is still going to produce through the air. So I'll go more on that.
Okay, so he's saying more than 226.5 yards passing. All right, now let's do Carson Beck. More or less than 265.5 yards passing.
I'm saying less because I think in this game, Miami is going to run the ball a good amount. And just so far this year for Beck, he threw for 205 against Notre Dame, 267 on Bethune Cookman, and 340 on USF. So that's trending upwards, but I do think that's not like it's not like a stock or anything. I think he's going to come back down to earth a little bit. And
Yeah.
like I said before, I do think there's a chance that Miami kind of plays in safe mode. And if anything else, you look at the other good opponent they played in Notre Dame, only 205 yards. Florida's got that defense probably similar to Notre Dame's, if not a little bit better. So I do think he'll be less than that 265 mark.
All right, what about Jaden Baugh? More or less than point 0.5 anytime touchdown.
I'm saying more because he just has to get in the end zone. His only touchdown so far this year was against Long Island, and despite not getting, a bunch of volume, he's still been producing very, very well when he does get the ball in his hands. And I think Florida has to turn to him more in general, but especially in the red zone when the passing lanes get even tighter to try and take pressure off of DJ and those receivers. So I'll go more on ball to score a touchdown.
All right, what about Hayden Hansen? He's been getting some targets the last couple of weeks, more or less than 35.5 yards receiving.
I'll say less because of Miami's secondary being a bit of a weakness. I think that's going to have Florida's receivers getting more separation, right? And way more room for Lagway to throw the ball to them. Hayden Hansen is the team's second leading pass catcher. He just should not be that high with how much talent is in that receiver room. So I think this game for Florida needs to go through Jaden Ball and throwing to your wideouts out wide. So for that reason, I'll go Hansen is less than 35.5.
Okay, let's look at Miami's running game a little bit. Mark Fletcher, more or less than 0.5 anytime touchdown.
I'll say more, sort of for the same reason that I said Ball was going to have more than 0.5. I think it's a steady dose of ground game all day for Miami. And I just think similar thing as to what I said for Jaden Ball. I think in the red zone, both teams will try and go to the ground game to try and take, some risk out of throwing the ball into tighter passing lanes with less room on the field. So I'll say Mark Fletcher goes more also.
Okay, let's talk for a second about Aiden Mizell. He has started to kind of make his appearance on the scene here. So do you think more or less than 0.5 anytime touchdowns for Aiden Mizell?
I think more. He is not being used enough right now for how well he's been playing. And when he got in against LSU, he played really, really good. He obviously had that touchdown, and his lengthy frame really makes him a great red zone target. So if they do go away from Jaden Ball in the red zone for whatever reason, I do think that Mizell will be that guy that DJ tries to throw the ball to. Excuse me. So I'll go over on Mizell for half a touchdown.
All right. This has been our more or less game brought to you by Sleeper. We love this segment every week. Okay, so we're going to talk for a minute about what Florida needs to do, what Miami needs to do, and some key matchups. But I want to get to some of the comments first. We have some on the side. Leon Roberts says, I predict everyone on College Game Day and the celebrity guest picker picks Miami over Florida. I think that probably happens. Liquid Flames, it seems like Jacoby Jackson has gotten as many touches as Jaden Baugh. Juan Manuel is very upset that you think that there's a mismatch with Miami's secondary. We've got some trauma from the LSU game still hanging on here. Manuel again says, Miami gave up 2 explosive plays last week. One was on a broken play from Brown. What makes him think that Florida is a mismatch versus any secondary? Florida's wide receivers are good. Just because they haven't shown it doesn't mean that they are not very talented. Okay. Juan Manuel again. You can't fix Lagway's issues in a week. How is Lagway's mental health is a question mark. His confidence shot. I think the thing that we've always been told about Lagway over the last 2 years is that he rebounds really quickly. He has a short memory in terms of carrying this with him. And then he never gets too high or too low. And that gives me confidence that he's going to shake it off. That's the job of a quarterback, to shake it off. And I don't find that they're quite as much of head cases as kickers. I'm married to one, so I'm allowed to say that. So I honestly would be shocked if we saw a similar performance out of Lagway. Now, does that mean he's going to put on a Heisman winning performance? Probably not. But I would be shocked if we had such a poor performance 2 weeks in a row. If Miami gets to 21, they win. Script a series for Trammell and see how he handles it. Playing DJ when his head is not right is not good for DJ. Us Gator fans have no confidence that Florida will upset Miami at Miami. Hey, Allie, go Gators. I hope they can get into South Florida and beat the Canes on Saturday. Well, we all do. Juan Manuel, how can Florida just manage the game with lack of depth at D-line? This Miami O-line is better and depleted and dominated last year. Florida's D-line is depleted. Florida's D-line is really deep, and this D-line was one of the best in the country the second half of the season. So they do have some injuries, and that is obviously concerning, but I don't really think that any of us think that Florida's D-line is depth is an issue. Obviously it's better with Banks, but I'm not that concerned about that. And Florida's offensive line is very good. So while Miami's defensive line is outstanding, they should at least give him a game. Yes, I said the wrong word. I said rushing instead of passing, but I did try and correct myself as we went on. Thanks, Sammy.
That's my little brother, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry, Sammy. All right, Juan Manuel. Florida's defense hasn't gone up against a very good offense yet. Long Island, South Florida, and currently LSU are not potent offenses. That is all facts. So yeah, those are our questions right now. Okay, so if Florida wins, it's because they did what?
It's because that passing game really started to click. You know, the receivers were able to get separation, and Lago was able to find them downfield. And more importantly, he was able to have time in the pocket to really make those throws, make those decisions, and he wasn't rushed into, bad throws, double, triple covers like we saw last week, stuff like that.
If Miami wins, it's because they did what? Right.
They absolutely dominated the trench battles, right? Because if their defensive line plays as good as realistically they have the potential to, Lagway won't even have time to throw that ball downfield. So if Miami wins, it's because both those trenches really dominated Florida, and just the Gators were kind of getting leaned on all game and couldn't really get into what they wanted to do.
What key matchups are you watching the most? Obviously, we are watching Florida's offensive line against Miami's defensive line. And conversely, I guess the reverse of that, can Florida's defensive line create any pressure? But is there any matchups that we haven't covered that you think could end up being key in this one?
I mean, not really much beyond just, receivers versus corners for Florida and Miami, because I brought it up briefly, but just like the Gators receivers athletically, they're unbelievable. Like guys like Vernell Brown and Trey Wilson, they're so good at getting separation and being electric in space. So we haven't seen that so far this year. I feel like I'm repeating myself. Sorry, but just like, being able to create space for Lagway to make confident throws. Because if it's a confidence issue with him and quarterbacks get gun shy, regardless of who it is, that's a problem. So those receivers have to be able to get separation against this Miami secondary that we've said we don't think it necessarily matches up super well with Florida athletically. And that'll make Lagway calmer, make him more confident throwing the ball, and also just give the ball to Jaden Ball. That's really the bottom line here.
All right. So you're not usually on with us for this segment, so this is new to you, but I always go over 5 things that I'm looking for in a game. So we can go back and forth because I don't know that we can come up with 5 separately each, but I am going to start with, I am looking for Florida's special teams to be a weapon as opposed to a liability.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just talk about that for just a little bit a second. Like if we get Vernell Brown to make a big punt return, that can shift an entire game. I mean, that's pretty much why South Carolina has won some of the games that they have. They don't look very good, but Fakari Swain as a punt returner, electric and totally turns the games. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, give me a matchup, or excuse me, give me a thing you are looking for.
Thing I'm looking for. I mean, 2 picks off of Carson Beck. Can Florida's secondary really do what they did to Beck last year, where they kept Florida in the game really with 3 interceptions off of him? Can they get just 1 or 2? Really, I think that could be all you need, because the turnover battle obviously it can define a lot of the games. So based on how Lagway does holding onto the ball, just 1 or 2 picks for Beck can really shift that whole game.
I'm going to say that Florida plays mistake-free or at least mistake-limited football. We watched 3 touchdowns be wiped off the board the last 2 games because of penalties. And I know that there's some Gator fans that think that some of them were ticky-tack, but the reality is this team has played undisciplined for years. And so that doesn't actually give referees the confidence that you're not doing the things that they think they're seeing in front of their eyes. So I need to see Florida play mistake free or as mistake free as possible football.
I'll kind of piggyback off that. Let's have a week where we don't need to issue a public apology, right? Because Brandon Beck had to do it against USF. Jabbar Jalouk just had to do it today. Let's not have an incident where we have to go on Twitter and apologize to the entire country, because that'd be probably a good place to start, I think.
It is wild that out of the 4 things that we're looking for so far, it's a unit not to be a liability, no public apologies, and less mistakes, less penalties. This is
starting from the ground up here. Yeah,
we are. We're talking Pop Warner football, bar at the moment. And I think the last thing though that I'm looking for, and you, I'm sure will agree with this, is that I need DJ Lagway to come on and be DJ Lagway. I need to see him set his feet before he throws. I need to see him make the correct reads. He's got to be able to see downfield, which it didn't look like he had the ability to do at all last week. But we know him and we know the athlete he is. We know the weapon that he can be. And it just doesn't seem likely that he continues as bad as last week was, because that I've got to believe that was rock bottom, right?
You would think, because I mean, even going back to last year, right? What some of the critiques of him that people will point out, like his box scores didn't look that great. Box scores lie to your face every single time. Just watching the tape, you saw that last year he was an absolute winner. He was the reason that the team turned around and was as good as they were. That guy is not gone. He's not gone at all. Just Lagway could not play football summer and fall. He's still working his way back into it. So as he keeps playing games, I really do believe that he's going to get sharper and sharper. He doesn't really get an easy spot to do it until Mississippi State, but even
Right.
then, that's a tough game. But I think he will keep getting better and better. Like you said, there's not another 5-pick game in Lagway, I don't think. But I do think we'll see him look a lot sharper this weekend.
All right, we're going to read a couple comments, then we're going to give our predictions and get out of here. Let's see. Let's see what we got. We need better passing concepts, get away from the 12 personnel more. I kind of think we are who we are at this point. How did Miami's defensive line and offensive line do versus Florida last year? Both Miami's lines are better than last year. Where is Florida better than last year? Great job, both of you. If Florida's offense and defensive line looked very different at the end of the season than they did at the beginning of the season. So I do believe that they were much better than when we saw each other last year. I don't know if you have a different opinion on that, Will, but they did both get much stronger. And Florida's offensive line, and listen, all of the media pundits could be wrong, but Florida's offensive line was actually ranked higher than Miami's offensive line going into this season. Now, have they played up to that ability? No, they haven't. But I do think the ability is there. There's a returning All-American and somebody else who may potentially be an All-American this year on that line. They've got the talent.
Definitely. And I would just say where else Florida has improved from last year's beat down to this year. The whole defense, I do believe, is better overall. And then skill player potential. I say potential because we haven't seen it yet, but those skill guys can really break games. And defensively, a great defense, I've heard the defense wins championships. I've heard that. So if that unit plays really, really well, they can be in any game that they set foot on.
Well, and I do believe this will probably be the best defense that Miami sees this entire season. I don't think that that's an exaggeration. Our defense, William Fisher says, our defense has only given up 2 touchdowns all year. Didn't USF score more than that against this vaunted Miami defense? Yes, they did. So, I mean, I do think this is not a cakewalk for Miami's offense. The question for me is more, can Florida score points than can Florida stop Miami from scoring points? Miami will get some. They're incredibly talented, but I don't know that they have to get very many to beat this offense, which is kind of the problem. Tom Driver says 42-13 Miami, unfortunately. 90% of college football runs 12 personnel. Did you forget Keelan Marion is an All-American at kick returner and Malachi Toney at punt returner? We did not forget that. Tony Driver, we have to play with our strength, and it ain't the 2 tight ends.
Amen.
But Billy built culture, ? Trey Wilson gets 100 yards, 20 in passing and 80 in motion. Facts. Gators by Fitty. Awesome show. All I can say is try to win, please. Just try. I mean, listen, we're all in the same boat here. 1,000-yard rusher in motion. What are you talking about? LSU blitzed almost every down. When do you think these guys would tire of all this BS? Like the other teams are being fooled by this crap. It's embarrassing. Listen, preach.
Yeah, the play calling is a bit of an issue given how predictable it seems.
Mark my words, we will get picked off from a slant. CB plays off, we throw a slant. I worry we're going to get smashed. How can you say this is the same Lagway as last year? You're on the tip of breaking a young quarterback's confidence that can compound his problem. I think Notre Dame's defense is pretty formidable. I do think Notre Dame's defense is very good. I think Florida's defense is better. And I think that they will give Miami's offense a test for sure. And I do think this is the same Lagway as last year. I think he had a really poor game last week and a decently poor game the week before. I think he's coming off of injury. I don't think he forgot all of the football that he knows. I don't think he's forgotten his footwork and stuff like that. I just think he is out of sync and out of practice, but he's too good of an athlete for at some point that not to click. Now, is that going to be this week? Florida fans can hope. But I just think overall he's too good an athlete to not see some improvement soon. You sure, Allie? No Caleb Banks? No Caleb Banks, but I do think Florida's defensive line is deep. Make no mistake, they are better with Caleb Banks. We about to turn this thing around. Let's freaking go. Michael, I'm with you. Let's
I
hope.
mean, you never know. There is still a path to the playoff if we just win enough games.
Chip in a
Schedule's hard enough.
chair. Can you guys be factual as if your house is on the line? How do you feel about this game? We're getting to it, Juan Michael. All right. It is time, Will, for our prediction. Lay it on me. What you got?
I'm going 27-17 Miami. I think Florida's defense is going to hold serve. They're going to put up a good fight and keep Miami under that 30-point mark. And Florida's offense, I do think, will have some plays where they're able to exploit Miami's secondary. And they're going to have some explosives, but that battle along the offensive line, I don't think they can win consistently. Florida can. I think they'll have their good reps, but I do think Miami's defensive line will just overpower Florida in the aggregate. So I don't think they have to score a ton of points to look a little more explosive. I think it'll be much slower and lower scoring than the total implies, similar to the game last week. But yeah, I got 27-17 Miami. So win by 10, but I do think the game's relatively competitive the entire time.
So you have more confidence in Florida's offense, and I have more confidence in Florida's defense. I predicted 21-10 Miami. I do think that Florida has the ability to keep this close. I just think that there's going to be some boneheaded play calling or some mistakes at the end that kind of cost us. There's a great chance some of those 10 points come off of a defensive play, a pick or something along those lines. But and I hope I'm wrong. I want Florida to win every single game, but looking at this realistically, it would be a shocking turn of events for Florida to beat this Miami team, who I do think is a tick better than the LSU team that we just lost to.
Definitely.
All right, well, tell everybody where they can find you on social media and listen to your work outside of a peek inside SEC football, which we do every Monday at 10 a.m.
Yeah, I'm on W. Thomas Sports on Twitter. You can find me on YouTube and on podcast at Tailgate Talk SEC, where I just do everything SEC all the time. So yeah, go check me out there.
All right, guys, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. If you are not, we appreciate the support. And as always, go Gators.